welcome to our video summarizing all you need to know about the history of Korea between 1897 and 1948. My name is Sarah, and today I'm going to give you an overview of the Korean Empire, the Japanese colonial rule, along with the Sino-Japanese War and its effect on Korea. This video is really useful, especially if you're studying the history of Korea as part of your coursework or exam, as I'll get into the details you need to know to get top marks. So let's get started. So first of all, the Korean Empire. So as a result of the First Sino-Japanese War in 1895, the Treaty of Shimonoseki was concluded between China and Japan. It stipulated the abolition of traditional relationships between Korea and China, the latter of which recognized the complete independence of Joseon and repudiated the former's political influence over the area. In 1897, Joseon was renamed the Korean Empire, and King Gojong became Emperor Gojong. The imperial government aimed to become a strong and independent nation by implementing domestic reforms, strengthening military forces, developing commerce and industry, and surveying land ownership. Russian influence was strong in the empire until being defeated by Japan in the Russo-Japanese War. Korea effectively became a protectorate of Japan on November 17, 1905. The Protectorate Treaty having been promulgated with Emperor Gojong's required seal or commission. Following the signing of the treaty, many intellectuals and scholars set up various organizations and associations, embarking on movement for independence. In 1907, Gojong was forced to abdicate after Japan learned that he sent secret envoys to the Second Hague Conventions to protest against the Protectorate Treaty, leading to the accession of Gojong's son, Emperor Seonjung. In 1909, independence activist An Jung-won assassinated Ito Hirobumi, former Resident General of Korea, for Ito's intrusion on the Korean politics. This prompted the Japanese to ban all political organizations and proceed with plans for annexation. After the Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty in 1910, Japan set out to repress Korean traditions and culture and to develop and implement policies primarily for the Japanese benefit. Japanese officials constructed European-styled transport and communication networks across the nation to extract resources and labor. This infrastructure was mostly destroyed later during the Korean War. The banking system was consolidated and the Korean currency abolished. The Japanese removed the Joseon hierarchy and destroyed much of the palace, and replaced it with the government office building. Korea was controlled by Japan under a Governor-General of Korea from 1910, until Japan's unconditional surrender to the Allied forces on 15 August 1949. The sovereignty was deemed to have passed from the Joseon dynasty to the provisional government of the Republic of Korea. So during that time, some resistance among the population took place. So first we can see it with the first independence movement, which was when the Republic of Korea protested against colonial rule of Japan, beginning with reading the Declaration of Independence at Park in Korea on March 1st. It spread to all over the country as well as overseas. Then the Provisional Government of Republic of Korea was an interim government established by independence in South Korea on April 13, 1919, in Shanghai, China. The representative of the people of South Korea proclaimed democratic republicanism led by politics. In 1931, continued anti-Japanese uprisings, such as the nationwide uprising of students in November 1929, led to the Japanese strengthening their military rule in 1931. After the outbreaks of the Sino-Japanese War in 1937 and World War II, Japan attempted to destroy Korea as a nation. The continuance of Korea culture itself began to be illegal. Worship at Japanese Shinto shrines was made compulsory. The school curriculum was radically modified to eliminate teaching in the Korean language and history. The Korean language was banned. Koreans who were forced to adopt Japanese names, and newspapers were prohibited from publishing in Korean. Numerous Korean cultural artifacts were destroyed or taken to Japan. According to an investigation by the South Korean government, more than 75,000 cultural assets were taken from Korea. Some Koreans left the Korean peninsula to exile in Manchuria and Primorsky Krai. Koreans in Manchuria formed resistance groups known as the Liberation Army. They would travel in and out of the Sino-Korean border, fighting guerrilla warfare with Japanese forces. Some of them would group together in the 40s as the Korean Liberation Army, which took part in Allied action in China and parts of Southeast Asia. The Japanese government general of Korea enforced the prohibition of teaching Hangul, which is the Korean language, and imposed policies to annihilate the Korean people. During the Second World War, Japan conducted a conscription system against Koreans. Japan forced almost all of the young people of Korea to Japan without conscripting Japanese citizens for the war of invasion. At the same time, around 200,000 girls and women, many from China and Korea, were forced into sexual slavery for Japanese soldiers with the euphemism comfort women. In 1943, at the Cairo Conference on November 22nd, the US, UK, and China agreed that in due course Korea shall become free and independent. At a later meeting in Yalta in February 1945, the Allies agreed to establish a four-power trustship over Korea. At the Cairo Conference on November 22nd, the US, UK, and China agreed that in due course Korea shall become free and independent. At a later meeting in Yalta in February 1945, the Allies agreed to establish a four-power trusteeship over Korea. On August, forces entered Korea by amphibious landings, enabling them to secure control in the north. Japan surrendered to the Allied forces on August 15, 1945. In December, a conference convened in Moscow to discuss the future of Korea. A 5-year trusteeship was discussed, and a joint Soviet-American commission was established. The commission met a term intently in Seoul, but members deadlocked over the issue of establishing a national government. In 1947, with no solution in sight, the United States submitted the Korean question to the United Nations General Assembly. Establishment of the Korean government on August 15, 1948, the official government was established in the Republic of Korea. On this day, the Republic of Korea selected the first president, reenacted the Constitution, and commemorated the 3rd anniversary of the independence. So that's all for this video about the history of Korea. If you found this useful, give it a thumbs up and do subscribe to our channel, where we offer materials that you can use as part of your studies to really get a better grasp of specific areas you might find challenging. Make sure to visit our website, where you'll find useful revision guides, model answers, and tools to get top marks. Thank you for listening.